Good morning and welcome to WNHH FM's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Adrian Huck makes our community tick. They'll be doing that this week in the interest of saving our planet. Not aiming low, aiming high. Adrian is a student at Metropolitan Business Academy and one of the organizers of a youth march planned this Friday in conjunction with similar actions worldwide to combat climate change. I want to thank Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. Adrian Huck, welcome
Hello.
to WNHH FM. So you're a senior.
Yes, I'm a senior now.
High school. Is this your first radio interview?
It is not.
Tell me about your first.
So I have done a segment with Melinda Tuhus in her The Forest and the Trees segment.
Is that WPKN or WSHU?
Yes, I think it's WPKN.
And
then,
please speak close to the mic.
Yep. Yeah. And then once on WIBC over the summer.
About climate change.
It touched on just like kind of getting to know me, and I did touch a little bit on climate change too.
All right, so you're a natch. You also done a lot of public speaking. We had a video of you on our site speaking at one of the youth climate action events. That's what we're going to talk about today. So Friday's a big day. All over the world, people have it as a climate action day, protests and other marches to try to convince local governments, national governments, other countries to try to save the planet and not deplete the ozone layer. So you're going to be joining climate. The one here is that you have student leaders, Metropolitan Business Co-op High, Hopkins Sound School, Sacred Heart, Wilbercross, as well as Yale and New Haven Academy. You're going to do a funeral procession marking the losses we've already seen and planting tombstones along the way. So where does that start and what time?
All right. So our march will be at 4 p.m. starting at the New Haven Green at the corner of Chapel and Church. So we call it a march because we are starting in one location, but we're going to each corner of the green and touching on different topics. And then
so
by
around
the
the green.
Yes, around the green. And then by the end, we'll be marching to City Hall and doing a die-in there. And so for the funeral procession, that symbolizes all the losses we've had, climate death, especially to not just like animals and ecosystems, but also to real people who have lost their lives due to lots of different natural disasters that have occurred due to climate change or relocation, all that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And then tell me about the die-in. How is that going to happen? Where at City Hall and why? And if you don't mind, get a little closer, Mike.
Okay. So the die-in, we will be on the steps of City Hall, so we're not going to obstruct anyone, coming in or on the streets really, but it does symbolize all the deaths that have been happening and will happen and have happened. So we're going to do that for a few minutes, and then after that, there'll be a symbolic kind of rise up after the death, so we're not, leaving on a negative note. It's going to be kind of like almost a resurrection, and then we're going to talk about what things need to die in order for us to have a great future. So, for example, with the coffin that we've made, we're going to put like things like greed in there and different words that symbolize things that need to die for us to have a safe future.
Okay. Adrian Huck from Metropolitan Business Academy joining with other student leaders from high schools across the city for this event. Now tell me how this all came about.
So New Haven Climate Movement has been around for a long time, but I personally joined in about May. I was already working with Elm Energy Efficiency Project with Chris Schweitzer, who overlooks a lot of these organizations and works on New Haven Climate Movement. And so through my work with Elm Energy Efficiency Project, we wanted to organize a protest/rally in May, and that was the first global strike. So this is the third. And then another girl from Co-op, Kiana Flores, she reached out to New Haven Climate Movement saying that she wanted to be involved. And so from us two, then we wanted to recruit more youth. So we got some people from Yale and some people from other schools just through connections and encouraging other people to join. And so then we had a core youth action team made.
And so why youth? What's the role? I think it's kind of an obvious question, but I want to see if you're going to see it the way I do. Why would young people have an important role in this movement?
So I think young people have an important role in this movement, especially because climate change is truly an issue that will be impacting our generation the most. And overall, like, I think throughout, like, I feel like in this movement specifically, youth have a very powerful role in this, because when we see youth stepping up and really taking positions and organizing and spreading the word and working on this kind of thing, it's really sending a message to adults and everyone else that this really matters to youth. Their future matters, and they care about having a safe future and a safe climate that they're going to grow up in, and that all the generations after us are going to grow up in. So I think it's really symbolic and powerful and moving that youth are so involved in this topic specifically, because it truly is our future, and it shouldn't have to be this way, that youth are the ones that are trying to take action when adults should already be doing this.
So this summer, your first goal, if I have it correct, was to get New Haven government to pass an emergency resolution, a climate change resolution. And that did finally happen at the Board of Alders. So you learned about government. First, you got organized. You got people to ask for it. Then you asked politicians to support it, and they did the climate emergency resolution. So it calls for New Haven to switch to 100% renewable energy in government, to transition fossil fuels and have a climate and sustainable framework to cut back in greenhouse gas emissions. So they already were doing a lot of that in city government. We were kind of, I think, a leader in the state. We've been putting up solar panels on a lot of city buildings. We have a fuel cell. What do you think is going to happen as a result of this?
So, to add on to what you were saying, I do see how New Haven is a pretty green city compared to other cities, especially like in Connecticut. And we did have the framework passed, I think last year. But a lot of those things, it included like almost 100 projects that New Haven Climate Movement wanted the city to take on, and they barely got implemented. So this really pushed for strong climate action now, which is another reason why like it's an emergency resolution, because it's done at emergency speed. So I think that's really what we needed, because we were having a lot of actions, especially like protection against climate change, but not prevention.
So what would be an example? With forming a cooperative to buy greener sources of energy, electricity with other municipalities, and what's something you'd like to see them do that they haven't done yet? Because you're totally right. They haven't done all the things they said they want to do eventually.
Mm-hmm. So I think what I want to see done, a lot of it is already put into the resolution. For example, so within 6 months, all the city departments will need to report back on how much they can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions that are feasible by 2021. And then they'll work to implement that. And then by 2030, there'll be no greenhouse gas emissions by our city. So I think that's really major for me. And also the renewable energy is important. Yeah, and it also touches on educating the New Haven community about the climate crisis and broader ecological crisis, and working with citizens, giving green jobs, really getting them involved in this. And
green jobs is a biggie, because they talk about job creation.
Yeah, job creation. And I think another big thing for me would probably be climate education in schools. I think that's really important. Yeah. I know some teachers in the district are really involved with this, especially at my school, trying to implement climate education as they can in their classes. And I think it's important on a larger scale, like district-wide, citywide, all of that, and starting off at a young age.
It seems like the Metropolitan Business kind of has some very socially conscious teachers who really kind of youthful. Even the ones who are older in age are kind of useful. And,
yeah,
and really
I love my teachers.
Yeah, you have great teachers over there. Try interesting ideas. So you did have experience with the political process, Adrian Huck. You and the other student leaders, did you have conversations with alders? You were there that night when they passed the resolution. They had the hearings, right? You spoke at the hearing?
Yes.
And what was that like to stand up in City Hall? And did you like read from prepared notes? Did they ask you questions? Were you nervous?
So I did have my testimony written, so I was reading it to them. I wasn't familiar with, how a hearing looks, or really like what it's like to talk to the alders. I personally wasn't very nervous, because I saw
seem very poised.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I saw a lot of other community members for other issues that were coming to that hearing and talking to them, so I felt more connected to the alders than just like, my thought was like, oh, I'm going to be at a podium, they're going to be listening. But it was more like a conversation at a table, because they were on the other side, I'm here, and then.
And was it late at night? That was a long hearing. It went late.
Yeah, it was a pretty long hearing.
What time did you speak?
Probably at like 8:30, and it started at 6, because there were a lot of different issues that needed to be touched on.
So that was to your advantage, because high school kids are on a clock where that's like still the morning. Whereas are the old people who you were talking to, it's bedtime. Coming up. I remember that from my kids being in high school. That clock, that teenage clock is pretty crazy. So in the end, they did amend it. They didn't do everything you wanted. They said that we can't commit to spending any money because we have a fiscal crisis. So we're going to have to come back at budget time. We want you to come back at budget time and make the case for specific ways we should be spending money that isn't already spent. Do I have that right?
So yeah, there were a few like small edits they made, and one of them was like we originally had commit 0.1% to the crisis and implementing things in the city to combat it. So that wasn't passed in the resolution, but what we did have was each of the mayoral candidates. I don't think Tony Harp has signed on yet, but to if they're in office, then they would commit to do that. So even if that's not in the resolution, then the mayor has that commitment that they agreed to. So there is a financial component of it that has passed.
Are you going to go back to budget hearings? Because those go late too.
We can, yeah.
And you'll be next to people who say don't spend money on anything because they don't want my taxes raised. And also people say climate change isn't happening.
Yeah.
Or it's not man-made.
I think that's what makes this a unique issue because I can see it like a lot of times when we're doing like public protests or that kind of thing, like that there's a lot of deniers. I don't see that a lot with too many other issues, but the fact that people are fighting for this and other people are saying it's not real, that's kind of I think that's what makes it a unique issue, that it's so controversial even though it's based on science.
Adrian Huck, senior at Metropolitan Business Academy, and one of the organizers, one of the people give us hope for tomorrow in New Haven. High school students are really organized. A lot of people, and got a bill passed at the legislature for climate change. Have a protest this Friday starting at 4. A march and a die-in. Chapel and church is going to start. What did you learn, Adrian? Something you didn't know before. When you how to organize rallies, when you learned how to meet students from other schools, and I'm sure you use the internet a lot because your generation's good at that, to get each other together, to have them show up, to get publicity. You did a great job on letting us know in the media to cover it. We didn't miss it, thanks to you. And then to get a bill passed. What did you learn from all that?
So I think the main thing I learned was that I realized, before doing all this, thinking about like organizing a strike or doing like a big public action, it felt like there was so many steps you needed to get there, but it's really like you spread the word, you plan it, and it happens, and people notice and media notices, and it really gets the word out. And I didn't realize that protests or organizing was like that, and that we really have a lot of free speech and people that support us. I think that's something great that we're able to do and that youth are able to participate in. And I definitely also learned more about just community outreach and networking, and more about like the legal process on a city government level and a state level.
Yeah,
and I definitely feel more connected to being involved in politics.
It's
and
fun
activism.
when you're part of a community. You believe in something, you work with other people. Tell me about a day since you got involved in May. Tell me about a day you're not going to forget where you were surprised about something. Or that it really mattered to you. You felt something special about the day.
Okay, I would say I was just meeting, I think it was a few months ago, with Chris Schweitzer, who organizes New Haven Climate Movement. And after our conversation, there was just like this spark in my head that said, I really like this, and this is something I know I want to do in the future. And it just felt really safe and comforting knowing that like I found something I'm really passionate in.
So you want to be an organizer?
I'm not sure yet, but I know I do want to do organizing. So I think that was a really affirming moment in my life where I was like, wow, like I know I want to be doing this in the future, and I love the work that I'm doing, that kind of thing. So
you said in May you were already involved in green energy efficiency programs with Chris Schweitzer, as an adult, different groups he has. So that's how you segued into this. How did this become your issue to begin with? How did you decide? How did you go about deciding that climate change is real, that it's man-made to some extent, and that action can make a difference, and that the planet's future is in peril? How did you decide that like people denied are wrong? Did you read what they wrote? How did you come to this firm belief?
So I think my interest really started in elementary and middle school, just based on, the lessons my mother taught me about not being wasteful, that kind of thing, or just things I noticed about our habits. And then that really stuck with me. And so when I was like going to school or like in the community, I would realize that not a lot of people were following these rules. Like not wasting your food, not recycling, and that kind of thing. And
Do you guys recycle and compost at home?
yes, we recycle, and I want to start composting, but we do a lot of gardening.
You could
and
throw the compost in our backyard for me. It's kind of fun. We do it. I was
Oh.
noticing all the worms the other day. It's really fun. Yeah.
Awesome.
What neighborhood do you live in?
I live in Derby,
Oh,
actually.
you live in the town of Derby.
Yeah,
Wow, and you commute to New Haven for
Mhm.
Metropolitan Business Academy.
yeah. Most of my time I actually spend in New Haven, but
So
Yeah.
how did it come about that you were commuting to New Haven?
well, it started in kindergarten. My parents decided to put me in a magnet school, and since
Which-
my I went to King Robinson, which is
Yep.
kindergarten through 8th grade, and they were interdistrict, so I was able to get a bus from Derby to New Haven. So I went there, completed elementary and middle school, and then I applied for New Haven high schools, and yeah, now I'm at Metro.
Well, you don't mind the bus ride?
No, I don't. And
What time do you start the day?
so I usually wake up at 6, and my bus will come like at 6:50.
See, and I know this sounds like an old man talking. When I was your age, getting up at 6 o'clock felt like tragedy. I felt like there'd been a massacre. I don't know. It's just like the clock is so different.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's okay with you. You're okay at 6.
I mean, I'm all right with it. I'm okay. But yeah, back to back to my interest.
So Derby. So growing up in Derby, are you part of Derby community at all?
Not really. Honestly, I don't spend much of my time in Derby. I'm not very involved with Derby. Most of my like time I'm spending in New Haven, like for school and extracurriculars and
So your parents,
seeing-
it sounded like your mom got you interested in environmentalism, in recycling and not wasting your food. Is that what you're saying?
yeah. I mean, it wasn't like a direct like lesson
She
and
doesn't work
lecture
for the
she
Sierra
taught me.
Club. She
No,
doesn't-
no, not any of that. But I mean, I think that's just where my interest began. And then when I started seeing that other people weren't doing these things, that made me like it made me upset, kind of thing. And I've always been that kid who like, if my peers are trying to throw something away, I would tell them to recycle, or I would tell them not to waste food or that kind of thing. And then in 8th grade, I did there's like this big 8th grade project that happens at my middle school. So I did that on recycling, and I learned a lot more about the different types of plastic, different cities that have done initiatives, what the 3 R's are, and that kind of thing. And I presented that. And then I did like recyclable crafts with the younger grades. And yeah, that was kind of the beginning. I was always really interested in recycling and pollution. And then once I got to high school, I learned more about climate change. And then
Where did you
later,
learn that?
I think so. I learned a little bit through like my science classes,
Mhm.
and then like more like independent kind of research because I was curious. But after connecting that with like, there was a big like talk about global warming, and then I realized that it's all connected too. Plus, when I started doing my work with energy efficiency, all the pieces really came together. Recycling, food waste, greenhouse gases, all of these things came together, and I realized that all of this is part of the climate crisis. And so for my passion for the environment, plus that, and then plus
And
starting
do you like nature? Do you go hike? Do you camp? That kind of stuff?
yeah, I do love nature, but I'm not hiking very often or that kind of thing. I've only gone camping like with different like programs really, and it wasn't like completely outdoors. We're just like in a
I
campground.
don't like camping. I love recycling. I love composting. I feel clean when I do it, but I don't like camping.
Yeah.
I like looking at the flowers in my backyard and the animals going around.
Mhm.
So I'm going to ask you a question that grown-ups don't answer about the environment
Mhm.
because it's too political tricky. Ready?
Mhm.
Okay. So with climate change, we know that shoreline is eroding. We know that the seas are rising, and that no matter what we do, we're on a trajectory for that. So in Canada, they're telling people not to build on coastal areas because it's all going to be washed up. Build inland. New Haven, we have Morris Cove, which some people think will be underwater, right? And that, do you think we should be telling people not to build on the coast where their homes are going to be destroyed?
Hmm. So I don't know about really any of the preventative measures that have been put in place in New Haven or other coastal cities in Connecticut.
Right, we spend money shoring up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
Shoreline.
I'm not very familiar with what actions have been done for sea level rise, but I do think it's important to acknowledge that and tell residents that just kind of like inform them about sea level rise and make sure that they know what it is and make sure, buildings and other places among the coastline are aware of that. And even my school, it's on Water Street. It's not
Right.
it's not far at all from Long Wharf, and it could be Water Street again.
Right. Right.
But
Which it was originally, by the way.
yes, it was originally. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's important to, educate these people and let them know about what's coming. A lot of the fact is that people aren't aware of how it's affecting them, and it's not just like a looming thing that might happen in the future where the earth is going to heat up a little bit, because it's a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm. And okay, and then does your school recycle?
So, about that, they don't. And I didn't learn that until maybe like my second year. Like there were always the blue recycling bins within my school. So, coming in freshman year, I was like, "Oh yay, this school recycles, great." But then there was also a sense of concern because I was like, "Wait, all the kids are throwing like normal trash in there. It's just being treated like a normal kind of trash bin." And so I was telling my teachers that, and then one of them told me that it actually doesn't get recycled because we don't have a recycling route for our school or our district, I think. Maybe a few schools do, but I definitely know that ours doesn't. And that really made me feel, kind of mad and almost hopeless. And I reached out to the superintendent about it, and she said things were in the works. And, you know, everyone always says things are in the works, but they may not always be. So I think the real crisis was the thing that caused nothing to happen with that was the budget crisis. And trying to get a new truck for that recycling route would be maybe like 200,000. Yeah, but that was really upsetting. That our school isn't recycling. And
were you spying on my family?
No.
You sure?
Yeah.
You sure?
Yes.
Because my daughter graduated Wilbercross High School in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
She discovered that they were putting the recycling in blue bins, but that it was just being dumped in the regular garbage.
Mm-hmm.
She got really upset.
Yeah.
So what she did was she organized, and it turned out that was a union issue, that the union didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So she organized students on a rotation to recycle the bins that would be picked up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that lasted till after her year.
Yeah, yeah.
So
like
ça change, huh?
I always try to, take my own stuff home and recycle that, but with the amount of waste that schools are producing, especially paper waste, every single day, it's way too much. Yeah.
So any plans on dealing with that?
So I know there's been like a lot of tension in the Board of Education, so I haven't brought it up for a few months.
Yeah.
And I know there was like talk about a superintendent change.
Yeah, that's gonna be happening. Yeah.
I haven't brought it up to the superintendent again, but there is someone I should reach out to soon. He was just he started working I think a few months ago. I think his name is Michael Pinto. Yeah, but I would love to reach out to him about that. And yeah, I would love to tackle recycling, but I'm also interested in, food waste from the schools and of course energy efficiency. And I wrote up a grant proposal for this energy efficiency contest in around May. And I outlined how the schools could save, I think it was 12,000, and it was just through power strips. So by investing, I think it was about 1,000 or less than 1,000 in power stripping and having students plug all the computers into power strips and then turn it off at the end of the day and turn it back on when they're using it. That can save thousands by the end of the year for just my school. Is that gonna happen? Well, so because I didn't win that contest, I didn't get like the grant money, so that has not happened. But I hope I can find some organization or donor that would want to implement that, because I would love to have it start out in my school or seen across other schools, especially since I'm a senior now. I would really love for schools to be more sustainable in this district before I leave, or at least someone to carry on the legacy. Yeah.
Well, you're just getting started, AJ and Huck. I loved hearing about what you're up to with this Friday's Youth Climate March. But it's not just for youth, right? Anyone can
No,
go?
it is not. So it is youth led, but everyone is welcome to come. So it is a general strike, and we made it at a time where it's accessible for both youth to come after school and for adults.
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Church and
yes.
chapel.
Church and chapel.
Friday.
Youth September
Climate
20th.
Movement.
Mhm.
Please be there. I loved hearing about everything you're up to. And I have so much optimism about what you're just getting started doing as an activist and someone who cares about our environment. Agent Huck, thanks for joining us today in Dateline New Haven.
Thank you.
Thanks to the miracle man behind the controls, WNHH station manager Harry Drost, and thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.